Again, guys, if you look at the radar screen, we had again, this was a pretty interesting week. Many of the, as you can see, the structure, I mean everything under the structural short has been, in most of the pairs have been breaking through. All your short points have also been taken out, and primarily if you just take a quick scan with your view on the structural shorts, if you will, you would see that the euro foremost, I mean, it has broken below the structure in the Japanese yen, broke below through the structure through the dollar, and broke through the structure below in the Australian dollar. And the dollar, as you can see from the week, has really began to accumulate at the bottom of the range. There has been a lot of talk going around on what's happening in the euro, and even with Trichet saying that they might even raise interest rate, the market seems to have been taking the reaction either with the Greek or whatever is happening, I don't know, but there has been some very nice setups that I'm going to discuss with you, specifically in the EuroCAD, for example. And we're also going to do this week on the Grad Club, we're going to have a little I'm going to spend some time with you guys discussing some things about some of the psychology and about some of how to take the trades, especially at or around the structure points. So I hope you join us on Wednesday on the Grad Club. Okay, so let's start with the dollar, like what we do every week. And this is now getting to be a pretty interesting setup. Let me remove this line for a second. You can see now that we definitely have a major downtrend. We have set up the low back in around mid-April, beginning of May, which was quite, we had this accumulation, if you will, for several days, and then we began the move up, taking us all the way pretty close to the 77.28, which was the prior reference point. And then of course we sold off again, going back all the way down to the low that was set at the beginning of this week, which is at or about the yes, of course, Brunel, of course you can be at or about the 74 level. Where's my right there? And we have now begun a move upwards, and we had 3 consecutive days, 3 big, I mean the last Friday was really a big move to the upside, and it was what we call a big range day. And the high that we set on Friday, yesterday, was 75.34. Okay, now we have a little bit of a minor structural point around here, around the 75 right there, which is about 75.49, if you will. So the high of the day of Friday was, as I said, 75.34, and that reference point is 75.49. So we're about 10 points away, or 10 pips away from that structure. It is not what we call a structure point or a trend changing point, rather it could be construed as a significant point. Now, after this big major downtrend that you see in front of you, if the index trades above the 75, let's say 49 or 75.50 ballpark, any one of those points, that most probably is going to lead to a short covering in the dollar. And as you can see, the major trend is to the downside, and it has been in such a decline now for a very long time. And this is, as I said, should be the beginning of a short covering rally. Now, if this is a short covering rally, and if this is the beginning of a short covering rally, then we need to look for confirmations. Because nothing trades in vacuum. There has to be signs that we are really getting, or the dollar is beginning to move upwards, and that short covering, i.e. the dollar moving upward, should continue. If that's the case, we should be having some signs, and that signs would be what? Would be weakening in commodities, would be weakening in the stock market, if you will, and it also would indicate that we might have something with regards to the treasury bonds or the bills, that we'll see some action happening over there. So we're going to take a quick look at the other stuff to find if there is any real correlation, so that we can see. Okay, let me pause it for a second. Saying, in order to make sure that we're not getting a head fake, or we're not being pulled up in a wrong direction, or because if we trade above the 75.49, the next, and that would be another significant point. It's not a structure point, which is around the 75.95 area. That here, this point over here, guys, is now going to become our structural point, and that will be the beginning of a trend change in the US dollar. And that price point was the high that has been established at on May 23rd, which is the 76.95. Any trade above the 76.95 will be considered a trend change. That means the dollar would have now turned, and we're having the beginning of a bull market, if you will, or a major trend. At least it will take us back to the 81 level at a minimum, but you're looking at an explosive move anywhere above the anywhere above the 79. Okay, there is this guy, I don't know what's his problem, N2X. I'm gonna knock you out. I'll keep on knocking you out until you come in with your name. Alright. So, with this, if we do trade above the 76.95 or the 77, we're probably going to have, as I said, the beginning of a bull market or an upward trend in the US dollar. In order for that to be the case, we need, and I'm going to go that forward a little bit to some of the commodities, because that would be our indication that this is actually true, and we need to be kept aware. So if you look at gold, you see that gold is beginning to weaken off. I mean, yesterday we had about a $12 move in gold. It's not yet a trend change in gold, but it's the beginning of a weakening move in gold. The same thing in silver. And again, there is this dollar goes up, commodities goes down, and this means they are beginning to sell the US dollar. And you can see that the long term has actually taken a short position as of May the 12th in the on silver. If you look at copper, you see now it's already below. We had a structural point over here below the 410, and it's already now trading below the 410. You guys that are doing the long-term room, you know that is now below the 410. We are at the beginning now. We should be looking for a trade towards the 380. You can see that also the crude also selling off. The big move in the dollar was mimicked on the other side with a big sell down in the in crude oil. It hasn't yet triggered the short, but it is the beginning of getting close to a selling point. You can see that the US dollar, the Dow Jones, the Nasdaq, I mean the weakest of them thus far is the Nasdaq, and also the S&P. So we have now the US stock market as a whole is beginning to sell off, and that is also substantiate the move that we see in the dollar. And we can see also that the commodities are beginning to sell off except for the grains. So with that, we have now some solid foundation that the selling in the or the buying that's coming into the dollar is coincides also, or it's, I mean, you can see that money is going out of these instruments and it's coming into the dollar. So there is cash outflow going out of these commodities, and there is cash inflow coming into the dollar. If you look at the other currencies so that we can see which ones we're going to be trading, so I'll take you back to the US dollar. And now the key point is that we have to keep an eye around the 75.50 and then the 76, but the key structure point is the 76.95. That is now going to be the structure point that we are going to look for as a trend change. The second, and therefore the dollar this week will be considered one of our focal currencies, and we'll be focusing on the dollar as from a point of strength. So the dollar will be a 3+. We're going to give the dollar it's going to be considered one of the strongest currencies that I'll be looking at this week. The second currency that I'm going to look at is, I'm just going to take them in order, is the yen. The yen is quite interesting because it is still strong. We have a minor sell signal on the yen. We have a minor sell signal on the yen, but this Friday, even though with the sell signal on Friday, that, let's say, to say the least, that sell signal has been negated. It is weak. My bias is to the downside, but this close at 124.54 at least will make me neutral versus the yen. So I will be kind of neutral. I'm not going to be that negative on the yen. So the yen would be, and just give it a 1-. So let me go back and put it here. So the yen, I'll just put it here. So, and that will be the Japanese yen. It's slightly weak. If we look at the Australian dollar, this one is still in an uptrend. It is a strong currency, but there are beginning of serious signs of weakening on the Aussie dollar, specifically a trade below the number, the 104.86. As you know, I mean, this is we're now in all-time historical high territory, so we are trying to take certain references of how to be trading it. So in this area over here, we can consider the Aussie right now, like this, in all this area, in a neutral zone. It is not yet triggering a sell signal. Our major trend change in the Aussie would be here, would be a trade below the 102.83. That will be the beginning of our 102.82. That will be the beginning that we can consider now. We are going to have the beginning of a correction or a trend change in the Aussie. So until we trade below the 102.83, we are still kind of negative to neutral with regards to the Australian dollar. Okay, this close based on the index does not indicate a sell signal as of yet. On the contrary, that we might be getting some buying in the Aussie dollar. If I look at the British pound, this is now in a pretty bad shape. That is here, the British pound now is the first currency that we have seen today that has a major sell signal. This here you have a minor structural point. We have failed below the 167 and we came down, and we closed the week. We have this structure point here at 162.33. We have closed the week at the 162.19. That indicates that the pound is extremely weak. We do have a bona fide sell signal on the pound, and therefore the pound would be a major sell for us. So just to put the signals here, so when I so the British pound is the weakest so far. All right, and the dollar is still the strongest. The Australian is kind of neutral, so I'm going to put the Aussie pretty much like the yen. All right, and if we're going to go to the Canadian, pretty much is sitting at the all-time, pretty much close to the all-time high here, topping up in the last move from April 2009. We don't really have any buy signals, if you will, into the Canadian, nor do we have any major sell signals into the CAD, unless it probably, I mean, there was a sell signal from here around the 103. So if we're going to do anything, we will be taking it below, I mean, the major we'll call it a minor significant point around the 101.26. So the CAD is weak. It is, and this, the reason I'm saying we want to wait until the 101.26 is because the Canadian is pretty, it moves in a very close correlation to the US dollar. So if the dollar is going to be moving up, at least the CAD will be supported. And last but not least, not last, there is let me do the Swiss franc. As you see, the Swiss franc here, this is pretty much near an all-time high. This is in a bona fide uptrend. It is, I guess so far it is just the safe haven. Everybody is putting their money in the safe haven, and any push down from the 118.83 level that we are at now until the 116.97 or the 117 is nothing more than a correction, and we're looking for a short term. So this is pretty much as strong as the dollar. This is in a bona fide bull market. I mean, we don't even have a sell signal on the Swiss franc. Last but not least is the euro, and this is quite negative. This is thus far is as weak as the British pound, even though it has not traded yet below the 142.47 based on the structure. So the euro is extremely weak. We have failed coming back from the 146. I'll show it to you better on the spot cash, but this is very weak close for the euro dollar, and we should be looking for continued weakness in the euro. So if I'm going to organize and choose my pairs, I would be looking initially to be a buyer of the dollar pairs. So I'd be looking to be a dollar buyer. I'd be looking to be buying the Swiss. I am looking at selling the British pound, and I'm looking at selling the euro. These are the two primary ones I'll be looking at selling. So in this case, my pairs of choice would be buy short the pound dollar, short the euro dollar. So these are two I'll be looking at, shorting the euro and the pound versus the dollar. Also, I can be doing that with, I didn't put the CAD here, so the CAD would be, so I can be looking at going short the euro CAD. I can also be looking at going short the pound CAD. So, but my first choice would be the pound dollar, the euro dollar, then the euro CAD, then the pound CAD. I might be looking at selling the pound Swiss and the euro Swiss. Okay, and of course I might be looking at going short the euro yen and the pound yen. Okay, so these are now going to be the selection. The Aussie, I will be looking again, it's pretty much like the yen. I mean, anything with the pound and the euro, these will be the primary ones. I'll be looking at selling the euro and the pound, and my choice will be the dollar first, then the Swiss franc, then the Canadian, then maybe the Aussie, and the yen. Okay, so this is the selection for the pairs this week. Okay, so while I'm saving this, any